I'm the Chief Global Initiatives Officer. One of the missions of our office is to connect the world of Laterno with the world beyond Laterno, either by finding opportunities and ways in which we can go other places, but also by bringing people from other parts of the world to here to help us broaden our perspective, to help us understand different ways of thinking about things and seeing things, to share their opportunities. We do that through the recruiting of international students, but we also, we got a few here, but also by bringing in people who have experience abroad to come and share with us. And we have that this afternoon with Professor Dov Shinar, who is a professor of communication at Hadassah College in Jerusalem. And you'll appreciate what he has to share with us. I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. He's going to be talking about the broad topic is called peace journalism. It's a way of thinking about the role of the media in, rather than escalating conflict, then helping to be a part of at least some kind of a resolution, or at least bringing down the conflict. So he'll develop that a lot more. I'll just give you a little bit of background of Professor Shinar. He was born in, anybody guess where he was born? Brazil. Brazil. Sao Paulo, Brazil. 1949, he got on a boat and arrived in Israel in 1950, just after Israel's independence, and so has lived in Israel through the wars, 56, 67, 73, 72, 73, and many others. So he's been, is that breadth of experience. He also is one of the leading scholars in the whole area of what is called peace journalism, and so this brings him, or takes him all over the world, doing both research but also helping in consultation in places such as Nicaragua and other countries in Latin America and parts of Africa. He speaks Portuguese, he speaks Spanish, he speaks Hebrew, he speaks English, a little bit of Italian, and probably other ones I don't even know about. But he's going to do English today for us all, so that's good. So, we want to give a warm welcome to Professor Dov Shinar.
Thank you very much, Kelly. I forgot to mention that I speak all the time. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate in interrupting, and I'll be short so that I can go through certain parts of this generic PowerPoint, which can be used for different purposes, and I think this is a good instance of the use of this of the PowerPoint. Somebody of the technicians help me if I'm wrong. I'm not wrong. Let me start with the story. I don't know whether the name Frederick Remington rings a bell among you, but certainly the name William Randolph Hearst does ring a bell. He is one of the first magnates of the American press. His New York Journal was very famous for being the first yellow publication in the United States. Yellow in the sense of sensationalist and so on and so forth. So when the states were in a state of tension with Spain over the question of Cuba, Mr. Hearst sends Remington, who was a photojournalist in his papers, to Havana to cover the impending war between the United States and Spain. And Remington, after having discovered the mojito, after having discovered the nightlife of Havana and other beauties, he cables home and says, requests to return, no war, no signs of war. To which Hearst responds, please remain, you furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war. And indeed, there wasn't really a war, but there was a lot of sensation around that, like the information about the drowning of the battleship Maine in Havana, which was wrong. It was not the work of the Spanish and so on and so forth. But this is more or less an illustration of why the media love war. Traditional media certainly, the press, radio, television, have a violent bias, as proved in the war in Vietnam, as proved in the terrible war in Rwanda, in which a station called Mille Collines, Rwanda is called the land of 1,000 hills, and this station was very instrumental in promoting mutual killing of Hutus and Tutsis. And in this sense, the media were quite happy in promoting war in different styles. And therefore, the media professionals were usually blamed for being war lovers or warmongers, blamed for an attitude of inciting, igniting rather than appeasing, and Syria and the Ukraine recently are good examples of what the media is doing, in many ways ignoring the number of victims and not really giving voice to the voiceless victims in such conflicts, but really giving us information about events, certain events, not necessarily processes. We cannot follow exactly, we as audiences cannot exactly follow what's going on there. We just get bits and pieces of the action, and therefore, not just the American public, but the public in the world at large does not react, I guess, the way it should be reacting to certain events around the world. And of course, the media can do it through a number of techniques. One being proactive, like Radio Mille Collines in Rwanda, which really incited towards killing. The media can be passive. Somebody says the New York Times is a good example. That the media does not interfere in harshly criticizing actions of different governments and so on. They just give you the news that fits to print. Is that correct? Okay. The media can be cooperative with governments. And in this sense, I could blame both the Israeli media and the Palestinian media for being quite cooperative, with some exceptions, especially in the Israeli case, with government policies. And of course, the media can be embedded, which is one of the, I think, greatest inventions of the recent wars, especially Iraq, for the way the government wants to conduct its work. And I have a great example. There is a book published by Dov Shinar, who is an independent journalist. He used to work for ABC, lives in New York, and he published a book accompanied by a disc in which he shows one part of it is an interview with an American female journalist embedded with a American unit somewhere in the desert. Never saw action. By the way, most of the units, army units in every army, never see action really. They are there because there is something going on, but and there are a number of examples of this kind. But what Dov Shinar shows is this journalist saying, when I saw my boys going into battle, and when I saw them trying to fall asleep in the cold of the desert, and they were not fed properly, and so on and so forth, my heart went out to them, and so on and so forth. Well, this is nice. I think this is important. But I wouldn't be sure this is the job of a journalist to work. And in this sense, it was a big success for whoever was interested in having the media cooperating with official policies. And please don't hesitate in responding to me while I'm talking. I'm trying to be provocative as well. But of course, I think this is a point of that gives us a number of options the media have, and whoever wants to manipulate the media can use in order to have the media act accordingly. Why is that so? Please, you guys from the global sector, don't say anything because I told you exactly why is that so. But there are a number of reasons, and possible reasons can be that violence has become central to media professional political and structural DNA. Professional, I'll explain in a minute. Political, it's clear. Structural has to do with money. There is a high correlation of violence, first of all, with the prevailing media culture, with the concept of news value. A violent event has much higher news value than a peace process. And this is important because in media research, we have discovered that the media prefer, for different reasons, not only in the States, but the world media, the globalizing media, and so on and so forth, the media prefers events rather than processes. The media wants to be interesting. Processes, peace processes, growing processes, dying processes of populations, this is boring. Very difficult to show. Even look at the trial series on the media. In 1 hour, they resolve any problem that would take sometimes months and sometimes years in a regular legal procedure. And please correct me, legal people here. I might be wrong, but in the media it's easy. You must get to a solution, but even more than that, I think I know. It's much more prestigious to become a war correspondent than to become a welfare correspondent, a welfare journalist, or a city hall, or to cover city hall, or to cover the courts. Sometimes you have you have O.J. Simpson, but how many guys like that? I hope not so many. But in any case, this is one thing, because see, usually there is a sector in communications research who says, okay, everything is a question of money. The media is structured around money, so they like war. This does not explain the entire preference. I think there is a lot to be looked at in terms of the professional ethos, the ways in which journalists want to have a career, and of course to give information and also to become famous. Nothing wrong about that. But it's part, I think this correlates with violence. Secondly, of course, the political climate in many times correlates with violence, certainly in totalitarian regimes, where government violence is dealt with by the media in certain terms allowed by governments, but also in democratic regimes. We know about cases of self-censorship. Even when you don't have an official censorship, you don't go all the way, because self-censorship is worse, I would say, than censorship, because you are always afraid that you are crossing a line. So you always stay beyond that line, that you are afraid, you imagine you are crossing. In a radio station, in television station, and so on and so forth. And of course, in the political climate, there is a lot of surrender to pressures. For example, in Israel now, there was a, I don't know, umpteenth committee to deal with public broadcasting in Israel. In Israel, the story is different because public broadcasting, like in England, preceded commercial broadcasting. And the Broadcasting Authority has had good times and has had bad times and has had corrupt times and has had experienced a lot of different times in its life, always being pressured by the government to publicize government positions, always being in bad financial situation, although people pay an annual tax to keep up, like in England, public broadcasting. But usually there are governmental programs. It doesn't matter who is in the government, left wing or right wing, pro-peace or not so pro-peace, I don't know how to say it, pro-war if you wish. Yeah, there is such a sector in Israel as well. And now this commission has decided to close up the broadcasting authority, like if in England the commission would say, okay, let's close up the BBC, fire everybody, and start again. Well, in broadcasting you never start over. Something will be started, but the political climate, for example, which prevails in Israel today, probably will make the public broadcasting into something else, into something which is not totally public in terms of broadcasting. And in this sense, we can see how the political climate, even in democratic countries, even in this country, has some influence on the way the media deal with violence, with peace, with war, and so on and so forth. And of course, we have the structural economic pressures, competition, scoop hunting, and being the first on the pack, and so on and so forth. And this is really linked with some contradictions and dilemmas in media conflict coverage. First of all, there is a confusion between patriotism and professionalism. Dan Rudder, shall I mention the name? Who said, look, I'm first an American and then a broadcaster. And this is tough because he is an American. But making this equation is not always right, because you don't have to choose between being a patriot or a professional. In many ways, there is a possibility of being both at the same time. But the dilemma is still there, especially in very strong conflicts like in the Middle East, like in Syria today. Al Jazeera. What is Al Jazeera? An Arab patriot or a professional institution? It started up like a professional institution. Now the Emir of Qatar, who are sponsoring Al Jazeera, has come up with certain requests, simple, modest requests, but Al Jazeera is behaving accordingly, taking positions in what is called the Arab Spring and so on and so forth.
What are your thoughts on the Al Jazeera America and the
Al Jazeera in English?
Well, they now have Al Jazeera America. They've stopped all Al Jazeera English in the States, and now we have Al Jazeera America for an American twist.
Well, I don't think this has been researched yet. I mean, I wouldn't be against it. I mean, it's, you have all kinds of people broadcasting with a lot of money broadcasting in this country. But it's still, I think it's still too early to judge what they're up to. One could guess. I could guess. My guess is as good as yours, and I think we have the same guess about what Al Jazeera might be doing in its relations with America. But I really, it's very difficult to grasp it. It has not been researched even, not even by American researchers. So I'm a bit surprised by it, but I couldn't answer that. Then we have a problem of ideology versus technology. In other words, my friend and colleague from University of Texas, Austin, Maxwell McCombs, who invented the theory of agenda setting, which, by the way, is the only theory in communication studies which works. Most of the others are subject of discussion. But we all know that the media determines our agenda. This is Max's big exit, the big logro, goal, achievement in his life. Okay, it sometimes happens when I try it. So an agenda setting is being threatened by the new media, because we don't know who's setting our agenda in a better way. ABC or one of the corporations, or Townsend, or Julian Assange, or any blog around the country. In other words, the traditional media newspapers, radio, television, they enjoy the monopoly over agenda setting until the internet. The internet is threatening this monopoly by changing the agenda. And I would say we're talking on the way, Kelly and I, about the fact that what we, the older people, the younger, older people, what we expect from the media something different than the younger people. Even those who watch television, but especially those who doesn't watch television so much, they get their information in other ways. And in this sense, we have this problem of violence, okay, of different media with a different menu of violence and non-violence and so on and so forth. And of course, we have the story of technology versus ethics. In other words, if you are able to transmit something which is happening right now out there to French television, and you can do it in seconds, right, these days, and you are afraid that your colleague will do it, will send it if you don't send it, are you going to do cross-checking on the event? On the event, I mean, what matters really is the event. So in this sense, there is a problem, a contradiction, a built-in contradiction into the media between technology and ethics, which is becoming more threatening, I think, every day. I'm not going to go into all the details of another type of contradiction, which is the adequacy of coverage techniques. Many techniques which are today legitimate and used every day were not considered legitimate 10 years ago. I can remember from my days at Israel Television, many years ago, when we started television in Israel, and I was also doing research until I decided on one of the ways, which was to go into research. We were doing the Israeli part of an NIH study, National Institute of Health, about sex and violence on television. And I was interviewing our military correspondents in radio, television, Israeli radio, television, and so on. And I invented a question saying, how much blood would you show in a case of stabbing in the street? And most of them, the big majority, said, we're not going to show blood because it's enough to show what's going on around it without having to excite or to incite or to have people become more excited about that. This today is not a question. Today, almost everybody, every station shows you a lot of blood. Look at the Syrian reporting. Look at reporting in other countries. Demonstrations in Venezuela at the time. Mr. Maduro was still not so Maduro. Okay, anyway. So I'm not going into that because we have a lot of techniques that are changing and can be changing. I think I will not have much time for that. But later on I could recommend a new book that has just come out, a collection of essays in which I deal with this and with some other topics. We have another problem, which I don't know how to call it, it's still a contradiction, of selective, of biased, fragmented narratives, facts, context, stories. In other words, these days, television can publish whatever they want. Remember the Malaysian plane. There are so many confusing information in every channel that we don't know what's going on. Okay, and it's very easy this is one quotation from what happened in one of the episodes of the Gulf War. But really, today the horizons are much more open for inventing all kinds of stories, and this finds its room on television and on radio and in the press. And finally, we're talking about discourse, selective narratives, whereby you emphasize certain parts of a narrative and do not emphasize the rest. Manipulation and rhetoric. We are talking about a dilemma of what do we use, politically correct discourse or some other kinds of discourse. And of course, the focus, the range of discourse is sometimes missing background, missing framework. If you go just on an event and if you have 45 seconds, very difficult, it's built in, very difficult to supply background. Not so difficult to tell your viewer, please go to this and this site, or go somewhere else, go to the newspaper, and look at what's going on more deeply, because we don't have the time. And I'll get back to this type of technique. One of the ways to correct that was suggested since the 70s under the name of peace journalism. It was suggested by a Norwegian scholar, Johan Galtung, who, after having been a scholar for a certain time and having published one classic article about foreign journalism, published in the 60s and still in every bibliography, or almost every bibliography on foreign journalism. But he decided to leave this type of academic activity and became a conflict mediator. And he himself says he has mediated in 42 conflicts. I don't know exactly, I didn't get information about which ones were successful and which ones were not. It was not in the media anyway. But what he came up with was an ideal, an ideal, if you wish, of a code of conduct for media and journalists, which would be fairer, more accurate in framing conflict, reducing the influence of the interests we mentioned. He spoke about providing the backgrounds and the context of conflicts reported in more transparent terms, transparent for the audience. As you can see, Galtung doesn't have journalistic experience, because these are very difficult things to do. Peace journalism has to do with creative ideas offered by the media for conflict resolution and transformation. It has to do with giving voice to all rival sides, except that sometimes you cannot get to the other side, and it is a problem. As you can see, I'm today quite critical of this initial approach. Fair reporting and fair reporting of the price paid by all parties in war, which is something the media does in a certain way. For example, we know that 130,000 people lost their lives in Syria. We know some other facts about that, but we don't know much about disabled people, and we don't have much about property loss, and even less than that about environment problems, about the damage caused by violence, by war to the environment. And usually it's separated. In the front pages, you have the news about the war. In some other page inside the paper, you have something about the environment. The relationship between both is brought in very little detail. And again, this is another problem. In very many ways, this is a kind of idealistic approach to improving the media, to improve the moral, the ethical, the professional standards of the media, not necessarily turning the media into just good news provider, because life is not just good news. But it's a kind of promise that unfortunately has not yet been proven as possible to realize. First of all, peace journalism has not yet become a significant media genre. You have some people who are peace journalists from time to time, but it's not yet a style. It's not yet a kind of discipline, which is, let's say, an alternative discipline to the regular ethos of journalism. Media, and this is very important, especially perhaps here, the media preference of violence has not been weakened by peace journalism, ideological, preaching, missionary, educational style. What I'm trying to say is that first, journalists, I would say, are a non-educable population. Okay, very difficult. I mean, and I can see why, because journalists are always afraid of being manipulated, of influences, and so on and so forth. So in this sense, they protect themselves by not becoming victims of that. Secondly, I have my reservations about whether the preaching style would help in such a profession like journalism. Maybe there are professions where it can have better results, but not here, where money is involved, and influence is involved, and politics are involved, in addition to the professional ethics. Okay, so I think this is a problem. And factually, the nature of war coverage has not been changed. Let's say, Second World War, we didn't have television yet, so it's difficult to compare. But since then, with the advent of television, the nature of war has not really changed. And in this sense, this is another problem with Galton's approach. And finally, we have something else. The media has been accused by peace activists as violence biased, right? But peace journalism can be accused of peace activism as well. And a German colleague, Thomas Hannig, has brought up the question. I mean, who are you? Are you a journalist or a peace activist? Are you promoting peace? How much? Through which ways, and so on and so forth. There is a kind of internal contradiction there. There might be an internal contradiction there. And in this sense, we have a problem in establishing a discipline or a profession of peace journalists. And indeed, most followers of Galtung's thinking, and there is a good list of them, they are on middle ground between peace activism and peace journalism. And in this sense, I think it doesn't contribute to either. I would suggest some conditions to improve peace journalism. I'm not sure I have the time to go through all of them. How much time do we still have?
We have, we have about 10 minutes.
Good.
And questions.
Yeah, okay. Okay, first of all, there is a publication called CGI Quarterly, published by the Toko Gakkai Foundation in Japan, which has to do with the promotion of peace since the end of Second World War. And they used to, they sponsor a research institute called the Toda Institute for Peace Research and Policy, which was based in Honolulu. Now I don't know where they are based. And this is where Galtung's first theories flourished. And some time ago, I was asked to write, surprisingly, because I became openly critical of Galtung's approach. But Toko Gakkai asked me to write a piece, which I started with what I call 7 golden questions to identify the problems of the media in covering violence, and perhaps to think about possible solutions. And these questions are, then I will go into conditions for immediate action, and perhaps I will mention the idea of a new paradigm for war coverage. I'm not sure I'll get there, but never mind. This goes according to the order of importance. The first question is, what are we getting? This is for every media consumer, not just for researchers. What are we getting? A flash of some kind of event or an analysis? What's being reported? Flashy, isolated, single events. Crimea. It was very difficult to understand, even I guess for the Russians, what was going on in the Crimea. Because it was different from the Ukraine. It was different from anything else that the media knew how to deal with. I mean, the option, I think major option was to deal with flashes. The capturing of the government house in Crimea, the Ukrainian base in Crimea. In other words, we could not, it was very difficult to connect between what was being reported. Or can we get informative background, context analysis of what leads to a demonstration and what can be expected. Temple Mount, every demonstration in Temple Mount, people are confused about what really is going on there. Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Because there are so many factors around it, political, national, religious, economic, and so on and so forth. Now there is a big crisis over the Israeli government's decision to have a group of settlers, of right-wing settlers, take care of the Wailing Wall, which is in the Temple Mount, is the subject of a lot of different positions. And I think this was a wrong decision, not because I have anything now to say about the settlers, but this could really worsen the situation, and the media was very happy with that. Okay, because it's really fits the media. So this is a golden question for a journalist, for a consumer of the media, for maybe other people involved, for politicians perhaps, if they can understand the meaning of that. But then a second question, what do we get, bias or balance? In other words, what story is being told, what narrative? There is a lot of Palestinians who say everything the Israelis are saying is, excuse me, bullshit. Everything which, the historical background and so on and so forth, we don't accept that. Many Israelis said, there is no Palestinian narrative. There is only one truth. Well, difficult. The media, especially, well, I think the partisan media can adopt that. Okay, but the media who declares itself to be open for everything and to provide all kinds of information, this is more difficult. Or can we get a more balanced account by all sides? Maybe we can. It happens. There are newspapers who do it. Not many, but they are around the world. And about that, the sub-questions here is there sufficient room for views that dissent from official narratives? Well, there are various opinions there. Some people think there should be. Some others say, no, if you are an official channel, or a semi-official channel, or an official channel in disguise, then it's different. We should reach other conclusions. Or to what extent can one believe that the information provided is balanced or biased? What tools has the educated viewer, if you wish, or the educated reader to decide whether what is being told by the media is not right or wrong, but is accurate or less accurate? And I come back here to what I think would be a good recommendation by the media. Please go to other media and look for background, if you are interested. Okay? The third question is whether the media provides satisfactory evidence to support claims made by conflicting sides. Many times we get just one side, we get an emphasis on one side. Many times we don't get an emphasis on anything. But the case of Russia and Ukraine is typical, because the Putin was taken for granted when he declared all kinds of things that really maybe just one of the big powers can behave this way, and this is what he did. But a smaller power could not say, look, I don't care what you guys are saying. I have a majority of Russians in the Crimea, and I don't care about anything. So this has never come to the judgment, it has not come frequently to the judgment of the readership or of the viewers. And in this sense, this is a very important question. This is even more important. When you report on a victory, are you reporting on a victory or on a victory? Okay? Is the coverage sufficiently clear and fair so as to allow for assessing the toll imposed on victorious and defeated sides? The Syrian people, what are they? The victorious or defeated? You know, it's difficult. Loss of life, damage, people, infrastructure. I mentioned that. I should have included here the environment. But this is a big one because we are used to when we read the paper or hear Christian Amanpour or some of the other Amanpours, the parachuting journalists. There was a victory here, there was a victory there, and so on and so forth. And it's very difficult to judge what they mean by victory. In the case of Amanpour, I know that since he jumps in for one day or two and kicks aside the regular reporter who knows much more about the context, for her it's much easier to say victorious and defeated, and this is it. And then she goes to another comment. It's not her personally. I'm talking about the practice of parachute journalism. Okay? The fifth question is, what do we get? More information or more of the same? Usually we get more of the same, because the repertoire of the media, especially in visual terms, you probably remember that in many conflicts, you get visuals from earlier conflicts in the same place. And you say, and it's written archive material or something like that. In other words, it's impossible that, I mean, we have these cases in Israel, in the Gaza operations, where for different reasons, journalists were not allowed. One of the reasons being that the organizations and the networks did not want to buy insurance for their journalists. So they say, don't go into the area. So you don't report and get whatever the official sources give you. But this is a problem, because do we get any knowledge enhancement by the media in a war like in Iraq? Do we get enough knowledge enhancement when some quarters claim for going into an operation in Iran? It's not easy. I mean, in many cases, this reflects some deficits in democracy. In other words, you don't tell the whole truth. So how do you expect people to react? Okay, and of course, what quality of information previously unknown is provided by media coverage. The media like patterns, and the media do not like to deviate from patterns and so on and so forth. 6, I mentioned that already. Who is the journalist? A journalist or a peace activist? And this is it's enough to mention that. I mean, this is matter for the article I did, but we can go on. And the final question is, what are we consuming, good media or bad media? Are they valuable channels doing a good professional job? What should be demanded from the media? Very difficult for the consumer to specify what is demanded. So this is really a more theoretical question, but I think it belongs there. And then we have my final piece. I'm not going into the new paradigm, but we have some immediate conditions that might be used. One is to update the peace journalism original disciplinary basis. In other words, Galtung and his followers used peace research. It's a kind of discipline, peace research, as their ideological basis. And what I am suggesting here, that we should add empirical work into that. And it's very interesting to notice that most empirical work in the last 5 years or so is being conducted in the third world. Northern Uganda, with the problems they have there, some other places in Asia, and so on and so forth. So it's interesting that there isn't much research work being done in Western democracies in this sense. And I think it will be important to add empirical studies to this thing, because Galton's idea was very ideological and not really empirically based. A second condition would be to adapt the media structure. In other words, to deal effectively with ownership, with political allegiance, and having effective steps being taken. I think that, let's say, parliaments or congresses in all over the world could deal with that. Well, even regarding the fact that they are not going to be very popular with the media, so re-election might be more problematic. But I guess this political science or social sciences could raise this point as an offer for increasing democracy and so on and so forth. And of course, I'm being theoretical here. I understand the problems involved in this, but it's worthwhile to mention that. Also, is to develop structural pluralism. In other words, multi-ownership. I mean, a multi-ownership in the media area, not to get out of the conglomerates which operate the media today, which might be very good for better journalism and recognizing that this is very difficult at present because everybody wants the income and so on and so forth. I think we should improve or revive the journalistic ethics, especially in one area. At present, we are involved with personal ethics for individual journalists. And there is very little done about ethics. I'm not talking about regulation, okay? I'm talking about ethic codes of ethics, on the institutional dimension. I mean, Dan Rather is remembered by his saying that he's first an American and then a journalist. But CBS was never blamed for anything in this sense. And Rather did not invent ethics or lack of it. So in this sense, I think it's important to deal and to have the courage to deal with conglomerates, with networks, and so on and so forth. I think expectations from journalists should be defined in a better way. It's always easy to come and accuse journalists of all kinds of things. So there are some possibilities of, for example, translate the new roles of the media with the advent of new media into clearer expectations. There are very little expectations defined for bloggers, for talkbackers. The talkback world is a jungle in this sense, a moral jungle. You may say anything you want and so on and so forth. I'm not saying to stop the people, but I'm saying to find mechanisms that might control that might steer that into more ethical directions. And there is a number of additional conditions that I'm not going to go into detail. If you are interested, I can refer you to where this thing is written. And I think we should not go into the new paradigm here. This will remain for the next time. So if you have questions, please, and thank you very much for your attention.
It seems that what you're suggesting here is that they've got to do a lot more work to do it right. And I think human nature being what it is, we're notoriously lazy, and if we can get by with doing this way, rather than look at this new way of trying to do it better, I'd much rather take the easy route and promote my ideology and get paid the same amount than work a lot harder, not promote my ideology, and get paid the same amount.
Even if it doesn't work?
Sure.
Well, so here we
disagree. That's right.
Okay. I mean, Galton's ideology is great. Really, it's fantastic. I don't think the problem is there. The problem is with the mechanism that you are using. And this is a mechanism that is, I think, is incompatible with with professional journalism. And in this sense, Galton was never a journalist. He just came up and said, okay, let's take these guys and put them on the right track. I have my doubts whether this is possible as a trend. Well, you can redirect a few journalists. This has happened, you know. You can invent a new network, but this will not change a whole professional culture, and this is the problem I am concerned with.
In conservative circles, like here in the South and throughout America, there's a claim that the media has a liberal bias. I'm curious to know your thoughts. Do you think the media in general has a worldview bias when it comes to what they pay attention to and what they report?
I think that for the reasons, some of the reasons I mentioned, contradiction, dilemmas, and so on and so forth, I would be surprised if the media would not be biased. Okay, not necessarily just with violence, but also with economics, but also with politics, and so on and so forth. So yes, this in a way, right now, this is built into the nature of how the media work. Not of the media themselves, but the way they work, the methods they work, the strategies, the tactics, and so on and so forth. And I think that to a certain extent, I don't mean revolutions, but I mean that to a certain extent, this could be corrected here and there, especially if you have allies among certain journalists. And this is starting to happen for a different reason, because the competition is so, see, if it's so open on the internet, so the guys at the institutions, they are in a bad position, in a worse position. So I think it is possible to go about that. I wouldn't say tomorrow, but I think it might work. This is my opinion, maybe not, but this is my opinion. Okay? Yeah, there is in the back.
Well, when you talk about media bias, you talk about media as if media is this thing. Media is people. Just like in this room right here, every last one of us has a bias because of our own experience. There's no such thing as total objectivity. There just isn't. But when you talk about media bias, if you turn on your television news and you want to see that thing that went up in flames, guess what? Everybody else is turning on the news. They want to see that thing that went up in flames. Just watch your Facebook. See the things that get shared and the things that get, you know, we keep talking about the media, but you got to realize the media are people just like you and I, and they're out there trying to get the story. And most of the time, they're doing the best job they can with what they have to work with. Now, granted, there are stories. I would almost counter to say, who's to say that it is a journalist's job to keep peace? Maybe the journalist's job is to lay it all out there, and if war happens, then maybe that's what needed to happen.
But that person's getting filtered through an editor.
Well, but you know, but that's happening less and less because of social media. You're starting to see citizen journalists. You're starting to see people that are, you know, but that's why you always. I remember when I first started in newspapers, we didn't put bylines on every story. But then we started putting bylines in every story because you know what? People wanted to know who was telling me this, who wrote this story, and now if you're really paying attention, who is writing this story, what is their agenda, what do you know about them as the writer? Have you kept track of some of the things that they've written? Do you trust Christiane Amanpour? Do you trust Brit Hume? Do you trust, you know, who do you trust? Who are, you know, and you look. I mean, visuals are going to sell. I mean, if they didn't sell, there wouldn't be a market for it. So it does get into the economics.
Okay, I couldn't agree with you more, especially in the area where you mentioned that there is no objectivity. This is exactly my point. And I agree with your point that people should trust the media. But if there are cases, if there are cases in which you get your own personal experience that the media did not do the job you are expecting from a certain medium or a certain journalist, you must have the chance to change it, to move into another direction in terms of a media organization or a media journalist and so on and so forth. And in this sense, if we don't take precautions or take some measures that will enable the citizen to be free and in this media, this huge media park, I would say Disney Park if you want, then certainly there is no point. People will stay with their own media and so on and so forth, which is okay, but then it depends on how much information you get and on what basis you take your decisions.
We're seeing that happening today between who watches Fox and who watches CNN and who watches MSNBC. People want to hear what they want to hear, the stories they choose to hear, they listen to those networks.
This is not that clear that they want to hear what they choose, because sometimes the choice is on in the reverse way, and the media adapt themselves to certain types of clients.
Know their audience.
Well, it's like in the consumer's world, you pack your goods in certain ways and so on and so forth. But looking at it from another point, not just from the point of, look, this is the world and this is how we should accept it, maybe we could have, in certain cases, not all of them, not immediately, the media is exactly like every one of us. The media can be improved every day. And whatever we think and whatever we live in, I mean, this is common to everybody else. Maybe we should have it better, not just behave better, but have a better surroundings and so on and so forth. So in this sense, I think we agree, okay?
Are there natural market forces that either make this problem worse or try to improve it, that you observe, or?
I'm thinking of natural forces.
They're just market-based?
No, not just market, also beliefs, also, professional mores, professional rules that a journalist would feel himself or herself to belong to them. So in many ways, this would be a line of telling journalists, listen, you are misbehaving, but maybe there are other points in democratic journalism that might enable you to improve coverage or to improve your organization and so on and so forth. I think this is happening. Unfortunately, these guys have to leave when they start improving their organization. Some of them are fired, some of them are not. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's just the market. It's also the atmosphere around, political aspects, moral aspects, ethical aspects. It comes together, I think.
So you spoke a little bit about how the younger young people are looking for a different thing, or looking for different journalism, or looking for different coverage. So how do we, as part of the younger young people, go about supporting or promoting peace journalism without going into journalism ourselves? Like, how do we promote that change without being the change?
Look, I think that by persuasion, persuasion might work better than preaching in this area, okay? In this area. In other words, if there are enough journalists or bloggers or electronic, well, it doesn't matter the name, who will consider their job to be more than keeping a kind of status quo, this might help the variety of information that floats in the market. Okay? I think the training of new journalists is very important. And here I could mention the work of the anthropologist Clifford Geertz, the late Clifford Geertz, who in anthropological methodology talked about thick description, not the old-timer description of what's going on openly to the eye of the anthropologist, but a thicker aspect of it. Where does it come from? What is the meaning in the general culture? It talks about natives and so on, about modern natives as well. But if we think in terms of thick training in journalism, in other words, okay, there is what your editor tells you, and when you apply for a job, what the guy who is teaching, coaching you tells you, but maybe there are other options. Okay, and this is what I mean by thickening journalism training. And of course, certain institutions are doing it already. Most of them are not. Most of them are teaching you that to write a piece, you need 3 parts, right? The beginning, the middle, and the end. But today there are in many places you have thickening. You have a process of thickening them, bringing in older journalists, bringing in bloggers, bringing in. I would bring in even these guys that everybody is hating these days, Assange and Townsend and so on. Not to teach courses. This is I don't think they are. This is their job, but to be heard. And this might be one way to go. Not just this last example, but the example of thickening the training, or if you wish, of thickening coverage. Like, yeah, this is what we have right now, like it was said before. But if we point out to the journalist that his or her coverage could be thickened, or the editor, okay? Editors need as much training as journalists. So this is one way to go, which is the personal way. You have also the institutional way, which is to try, not regulation. I'm not talking about regulation at all. Regulation doesn't work in this sense. But in the institutional level, to call the attention of whoever is making decisions to some aspects. This might work in some cases, it might not work, but it might be one way as well.
Could you tack the same issue, like to give it a way to steer the culture? Could you make peace journalism almost like the counterbalance if you are working with an organization that has the fairness doctrine?
I think this will be more difficult because all these organizations would always be blamed for activism and for excessive liberalism, if you wish. And I mean, they are very necessary, these organizations. But I think that it could work more in other areas than in journalism. Journalism has a sui generis, a special way of being looked at. So if you join journalists with all kinds of organizations, this has happened in Israel, when journalists have exactly the same byline than civic organizations. And then they become immediately identified with a certain organization. And this, I think, wouldn't be productive.
Professor, can you speak to what might happen the next 9 months related to the peace process and media covering it? Our media, your media, and Palestinian media covered the peace process during the Oslo seasons, during the Sharon, Arafat. Now we're into a season in April where a framework is expected. What would you say to that media as they get ready for that, and what do you expect? Are there lessons to be learned?
Look, it depends on the process itself. I mean, if you take Oslo in the 90s, which was a first, and the media made a big mistake by reporting it as if peace has arrived or is around the corner, and not as the beginning of a process that might lead and so on and so forth. And the media paid the dear price for that because people started not believing what they are saying. And in this sense, this is one example, but it's an example of something else. A colleague of mine, she did a comparison between how the media treated Yasser Arafat before Oslo and after, and it was striking. The difference was striking. Of course, they stopped calling him the assassin and the guy with the hair on his face, like Menachem Begin, the prime minister, used to call him, and so on and so forth. Now, the later process, the process today is so slow that it doesn't fit the media. You know, you don't have these big things, you have declarations. You don't have these flashes that you can go in, zoom into, and say, okay, look what's happening. In Oslo, this happened. In the peace agreement with Jordan, this happened. There was a case of a Jordanian soldier who shot a number of girls going on a trip, and King Hussein comes over to the family and kneels to the family, which is a fantastic example, and the media is all over that, I mean, of course. So Hussein knew how to deal with the media knew what their role was, and so on and so forth. This is not easy because many politicians are using these processes for their own purposes. I don't know whether this was in the previous lecture, but I mentioned Arafat's behavior in Alexandria when after the media event on the White House lawn, they had to sign another agreement on the details, the maps and everything. So Shimon Peres, then Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yitzhak Rabin and Arafat were there, Mubarak was there, Christopher was there, the American Secretary of State, and prime ministers and presidents and Tipper Gore running around with their little camera and shooting the 3,000 people that convened over there. And this was the White House. Alexandria was different. With a row of foreign ministers. Everybody wants this photo op, to appear in this photo op. But when they started signing, at a certain moment, Arafat was invited to sign, and he went to the corner and he stood like this. He's saying, I'm not going to sign that. Now everybody knew he was going to sign. But Mubarak got a signal to keep talking. Well, Mubarak was very good at it, so he kept talking. And Warren Christopher was running between the sides to try and get a settlement. And finally, Arafat agreed. But in the meantime, he got 15 minutes of exclusive coverage because every camera was turned upon him. So today, we don't have this situation. I mean, we know better that these processes are full of problems and so on and so forth. So I think both the media and the politicians are very careful, except for Kerry, who, I mean, is traveling so much. I just traveled 14 hours, and I felt very bad yesterday. Now I'm okay, I hope. But this guy is going back and forth all the time. So this is nice for the media. But see, the media is now taking advantage of the less serious aspects of the process because the process is not running at the media's pace. So in this sense, they are doing all kinds of nonsense. I mean, interviewing people who don't belong there and so on and so forth. But I think they changed the tactics because the real life is not behaving according to the script.
To the script of Oslo
Yeah,
or
okay.
other scripts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Let's give